Strombo Show on the Chorus Radio Network. I love that song. That's not bad. All right, you're listening to us across the country on the radio. This would be either in Toronto, Vancouver, Hamilton, Winnipeg, or London. And welcome to everybody listening online and on your digital cable, satellite cable, whatever you may have in your place. We've been talking about this for a long time. Very excited to have them. Big record this year called In Rainbows, not just musically, but also what it's done for the industry. So there's a lot to talk about with this guy. Joining us now on the phone is Ed O'Brien from Radiohead. How are you, man?
Good.
Things are going well, eh?
Yeah, very nice.
So, talk about the record just in the sense of the lead up to it. There was a lot of talk about this new way to release the album. I mean, talk about what some of the conversations were like in the band before you got to this point.
Okay. Firstly, we don't want to sign big, huge record deals for lots of money. That was one thing that was becoming perfectly obvious, that we kind of wanted to do an album-by-album approach. That didn't necessarily negate re-signing with EMI. I may hasten to add, but we didn't want to do the big, huge advance because that seemed to be something that it doesn't usually serve bands very well when they get given huge amounts of money up front and stuff like that. So that was another thing. One. Another was there's a whole. I think we wanted to embrace this whole idea of or at least acknowledge it in a mature way, the whole idea that when you make a release now, that it's available basically free on the internet through various means. You know, every record of ours since Kid A had been leaked and was all over the internet before the CDs hit the shops. So we wanted to acknowledge that, and we also wanted to acknowledge, that there's a whole generation of people out there who, and I would imagine they're probably students, and sort of it's a younger generation than my generation, who don't expect to pay for their music. And I heard a particularly brilliant interview with Quincy Jones about a year and a half ago, and he's an incredibly wise man, obviously. Undoubtedly one of the standout musical characters of the 20th and 21st century. And the question was posed to him, and he was asked, how do you feel about the music industry? Are you scared by the fact that there's music for free all over the internet and physical record sales are diminishing and all this? And he was like, no, he said, man, and his phrase was, the genie is out of the bottle. There's a whole generation out there who don't expect to pay for music, and you can't say necessarily that's right or wrong. It's just a fact. So I think we wanted to acknowledge that in a way, and we also wanted to really hold any decisions that we would make on the release of the record right until the end of the record, once the record was mastered and we discovered what kind of record we had within us.
So I guess you always want to sit back and let it breathe for a while, and then you can go and make. Did you make a lot of last minute changes?
Yeah, we always do. We didn't really let it breathe. What we did was we finished the end of June. It was mastered beginning of July, the first couple of masterings, and then we had 6 weeks off, and we reconvened in beginning of September, and there were some further mastering had been done, but it was done pretty much. Okay, what kind of record do we have? We decided, our management had, of course, I've sort of slightly omitted the fact that the management back in April had come up with this idea of doing a download release initially with an honesty box approach, with people paying what they felt was right. So we knew that was going to be the first release, the way it was going to be released initially, but we also knew that we wanted to have a physical CD release. But we didn't know whether we were going to re-sign with EMI or who we were going to go with the record. So it was all about the download.
Was everybody in the band on the same page, or was there much discussion about this?
Yeah, there was quite a bit of discussion, but I think when something feels right, we felt it was genuinely brilliant idea, and it fitted us perfectly. It suited us perfectly, and I think the only discussion was that they initially said, well, let's just not do a physical release at all. Let's just do it as a download only, bang. And we felt that was a bit too extreme. We wanted to have our generation is one that still likes to have a CD or an album and likes to flick through the artwork and the credits and stuff like that and wants something in their hands. So That was really the only further discussion. But yeah, we were all in agreement about it.
We're talking with Ed O'Brien from Radiohead here, the new record called In Rainbows. You mentioned the generational thing, and I wondered, when you experience music differently in that sense, when there isn't the same kind of relationship with the physical package, do you think that changes one's relationship with a record?
Yeah, I mean, I can only speak from my experience that I grew up with, my first records I bought were in the 70s, and they were all vinyl, they were albums. So
which was the first one?
Well, the first record that my father gave me was Sgt. Pepper's, and he was like age 7. It was like, listen up, son, this is music. And it was obviously the double gatefold sleeve, and it was amazing. But the first album I went out and bought myself, apart from, again, the Beatles' greatest hits, the blue and the red greatest hits, was ELO Out of the Blue.
Excellent. That explains.
And I remember that album cover, because it was a spaceship, and it was at the time Close Encounters had just come out. So it was, and you'd open this thing up, and in the middle, it was like the deck of the Starship Enterprise. It was the heart of the spaceship.
I think that might explain a lot about your band, doesn't it? If it's the Beatles and ELO to start, that kind of sets the tone.
Well, ELO is probably a personal one of mine in the early days. I don't think any of the others would claim to. In fact, they'd be horrified, probably. No, I mean, the Beatles, obviously, for all of us, are huge. But it was that whole thing of, it's just so physical. It was just a thing that you held and you cherished and you looked after. And I bought the plastic sleeve to put it in so that the artwork and the edges of the record wouldn't get frayed. So I've grown up with this. So I still like something that's physical. I love looking. I mean, I was just this morning listening to the Feist record, the new Feist record, or not so new, the one from last year. Mm-hmm. And again, I love looking through the credits. I've always loved looking, where's the album recorded? Who are the engineers? Mm-hmm. Name check, their name check. I don't know. For me, that's what I need to, when I love music, that's what I like to get in there and really into. I would not choose to sort of, patronize or presume that that's the only way you can listen to music. And I think that, if somebody is 17, 18 years old who just not into that, just music is a kind of, remember, music probably for a 17, 18-year-old is just probably there constantly. Whereas when I was a 17 and 18-year-old, well, you had Walkmans, but that was the first thing really that you could take, that music was portable. Mm-hmm. Now it's all portable. It's all about portable music. So it's a different experience. So my foundations are very different from someone who's 16, 17 now.
All right, we're talking to Ed O'Brien here from the band called Radiohead. More to get into with you, Ed, so hang on a second. Let's play some music, though, from the album In Rainbows. This is Body Snatchers. It's Radiohead. You're listening to the Strombo Show. Toronto, Vancouver, Winnipeg, Hamilton, London. Let's carry on our conversation. We were joined by Ed O'Brien from Radiohead. Ed, let me ask you, when Radiohead goes into a studio now, I don't want to presume that it's much different from how it would have been 10 years ago, but is it a different experience when you as a band, as Radiohead, go in to make a record?
Well, frighteningly, there seem to be some common traits that run throughout all our recordings, like, one of the things we suffered from on this record was a case of huge lack of collective self-confidence. And when you've got lack of collective self-confidence, it kind of can become personal as well. It wasn't too bad on the personal front, but because we knew we were okay, but we just wasn't happening together for a while. So that didn't really happen on Hail to the Thief, but it's happened on every other record. Mm-hmm. And I would consider probably Hail to the Thief possibly one of our strongest things. So maybe it's an important thing that we need that pushes us that bit further. I think an interesting thing is, one thing that we did when we've made records in the past, we made a record that, the Benz, OK Computer and Kid A, particularly, the whole idea of those records was that you make you record these songs and then you sequence them. And the whole idea is that it's very traditional. You put the record on, or you put the CD on, you listen to it from start to finish. It's meant to be listened to in its entirety. Like my favorite albums, like What's Going On, Marvin Gaye, Abbey Road, Beatles, those kind of records. And of course now it's very different. And we were sort of, one of the questions we were umming on is saying, well, how important is a track listing? Maybe it's because people just make their own track listing, and that's cool and that's fine. But I think we still were kind of like, Nigel's like saying, no, you've still got to make a record. You've still got to be old-fashioned, because there's still people out there who want to hear it from start to finish, and it's got to flow. It's got to be a body of work that flows from start to finish. So we ended up doing that again.
Talk about the collective self-confidence. When does it occur to you that it isn't clicking? Is it 3 months into a tour when you guys do look around and say, I don't know? Or is it when there's time off?
Well, the touring it's a bit of a smokescreen, you know, because touring it's kind of a bit like the payoff for what we do. It can be really fun to play your music in front of people and to have these glorious evenings, and when we all sort of come together and we all leave and we're all happy. And it's not very real in a way about what we do. It is because it's immediate, but in terms of what we do recording wise, it's a bit false. So because we were having a tough time of it in the studio and it wasn't happening, we decided to go out on the road 2 years ago in 2006, the summer, and did some shows in theatres. And I remember we came up to Toronto and to Montreal, did some great theatre shows up there. And we were playing in the new material, playing 10 songs or so. And the problem with that was that we've got a very partisan, loyal audience who are just really pleased to see us, and we're obviously pleased to see them, and they cheer every song, and it's great. And you come off the road thinking, wow, these songs are great, and we're going to just literally record them live and bang. And we got back into the studio, and quite frankly, they just weren't up to scratch. And you can get away with a lot when you play live. You know, we realise that you can get a little bit sloppy if you're not careful, because it's the vibe, the emotion is something that's so important with that. Whereas you've got to be pretty on it when you record. So when we got back in the studio with Nigel, it became fairly obvious that what we had wasn't great. So it's more noticeable if you're having like 2 or 3 weeks when it's just really hard work and you don't seem to be making any progress. It can be quite demoralizing, especially if you have expectations of greater things. And I think what we'll learn next time is to be less judgmental, have lower expectations, but just go, you know what, even in this time. And we kept on saying it to ourselves. We said, even though it's kind of not going great, there'll be things from this that are really great. And of course, there were things from it. So you have to hold on and keep doing it, really.
I wonder how connected you are, not just to your expectations, but to the fans' expectations, in that while you're doing this, you realize that every time a Radiohead record comes out, it's more than just a band putting out a record. There's right. You have a very different relationship with your audience. In that, when I saw that theater tour you were talking about, and I loved the shows, but there was a really neat element that had developed that I hadn't seen in previous Radiohead shows. And I guess it comes with heritage. When there's a whole group of people who are brand new to the band and had
right.
no idea, or weren't that personally connected to the initial explosion of Radiohead. And I wonder if you recognize that from the stage.
I don't know. It's a difficult one. I mean, you know, on a basic level, you can sort of see it when what I loved about that last tour was you'd see people my age or slightly older, you know, in their late 30s, early 40s, bringing along their kids who are 6 or 7. So obviously those kids weren't born when Kid A was out. And we just did this show, a small gig in East London a couple of weeks ago. And it was 200 people, and it was really interesting that the people there were not my age. They were like 18, 19, 20. So I sort of never really sort of take it in, but it's like, well, that's great to still get people in who are 18, 19, who are rather than just our age group or older, and is a great thing. And I don't think we're fully aware of when people arrive new to it, but I think that we see a whole span of ages when you look out there, and that, you know, that's just great for the heart. That's great for the soul when you see that. To think that you might possibly be somebody's first gig, it's like losing their gig virginity with you. It's just a very special thing, you know.
Certainly.
I was talking to the cab driver on the way into the studio, and he said to me he knew all sorts of different music, and he's like 60 and he's been into house and clubbing recently, and he's been into bands since the 60s when he was a teenager. And he said, my favorite band was The Police. And I said, wow, that was the first gig I ever went to see with The Police. So that thing, if someone's coming to see you for the first time, and it's a very special thing, you know.
Sure. You know, it's funny you mentioned The Police, because they just came back and did their whole thing, but there was a lot of time in between when that band was off. And I wonder, you're at that stage of your career now with this particular band. You have a lot of records. Do you think about Radiohead in the bigger picture in terms of the longevity? Because this never lasts forever.
No, well, you're absolutely right, and it's something that's it has sort of caught my notice a bit. I mean, I think the thing is with bands, there's a kind of a rule of thumb with bands, that bands have a window of of creativity. And you're lucky if that's over 10, 15 years. After that, it's very difficult. And solo artists seem to be able to do it a lot more better because it's one person. So, like Neil Young, for instance, somebody's done it right, but it's one individual. When you've got 5 people and, we all move in different ways. We all grow up in different ways. We mature in different ways. We all move differently in different times. So for you, the 5 of you to be completely focused becomes harder. So for instance, I felt when we were making this record, it was so hard summoning all the energy I could possibly, and I know that we all did this, and I think there was a general feeling that this was possibly our last record doing it. It was the final last push. But now that we've done it and we're happy and blah blah blah, I think it's just, you have to just take it one album at a time, really. And you're only as good as your last record. Radiohead won't be making records in order to sustain a greatest hits tour, for example, to go out there and play live. But we want to make records that really mean something still, that still move people.
Yeah.
The Bends, OK Computer, and Kid A, there's a thing that was in those 3 records, that a magic that we needed to get back for In Rainbows. And I think the reason we're so happy is because I think we did that.
How did you do it? Like, is it a conversation thing? Do you jam a song out until your fingers bleed? Like, how do you get to break that darkness?
You just do it. It's not just about playing till your fingers bleed. I really, that doesn't work with our band. We've never been one. You hear these stories of like when the Stones did Exile on Main Street, they were jamming all night. I mean, that is so un-Radiohead. Our classically, our band rehearsals, maximum they last 3 or 4 hours. We don't need a lot of playing together we need enough, but not too much.
All right, man, let's play some more music. We'll come back and talk some more. We're in conversation with Ed O'Brien from a little band called Radiohead. Let's go back to OK Computer. This is Paranoid Android, Radiohead on the Strombo Show on the Chorus Radio Network. Canada, and we've got cities like Vancouver and Toronto and Montreal, which are on the docket. Are there songs on In Rainbows that you're just really excited to play live, to get into, because they were the ones that you really connected to in the making of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of them. I mean, I think because I think it's quite an emotional record, and I think people have noticed that, and I think that people have sort of really, I mean, that was the first thing for me when we started rehearsing. It was like I really connected with Tom's lyrics. It was like, wow, this is very powerful stuff. So when you play songs that connect with people, it's an incredible force that you feel, and it's a two-way thing, So, I mean, I can't wait to be playing. I mean, all that. I'm particularly if we get Weird Fishes arpeggio right on the night. I mean, a balmy, warm summer's night somewhere in Montreal or Vancouver or Toronto, and there are a few people out there, and we've got the groove right, and the sun's going down, and all's well with the world. Those are things to savor.
Tom had said that it's a very seductive record lyrically.
Yeah.
Is it nice to be, I guess, surprised or nice to be sort of enveloped by your singer's lyrics 15 years in?
Yeah, it's really important. I mean, I think it goes for not just his lyrics, but it goes for everyone to be surprised by what they do, to go, wow, I really like what that person's done. That's really, really important. That's really cool, and that's very important to keep surprising stuff. And I think it's a harder job doing lyrics as you get older in a way. I think, particularly in the medium that we're in, I think what surprised me about Tom's lyrics were, that they were so personal. It was the most personal lyrics I'd seen from him for a long time. But they were also incredibly mature. They weren't, they were lyrics from somebody who's 37, 38. They're not from somebody who's trying to write for a 21-year-old or it's the stuff of being a sentient human being on this planet. And we all kind of, we all might seem quite different, but in many ways we all have very common emotional experiences.
And you know how a lot of bands, well, just a lot of people in general and any group of friends are very different in the way they handle each other's moments. And I wondered, because you hear about Tom not liking to tour, and you hear about within the band there's a push for creativity. Is the band good at dealing with each other's issues when they arise?
Yeah, I think we are. I think we're getting better. I mean, I think that the trouble is we started off as
kids,
5 boys from middle class homes where emotions and all that stuff is usually swept under the carpet, and communication is can be quite it it can be quite sort of superficial. It can be great when everything's going well, but as soon as stuff starts getting sticky, it's sort of, well, I don't know really what to say. I think we're good at confronting these things, and also we're good at giving people space. I mean, at the end of the day, you want the people that you're in this band to be with to be happy and healthy, and so sometimes being in this industry, doing the music and stuff like that, and the things that we do aren't necessarily conducive to that. So you have to give people space to let them go through their own things, but B, you also have to recognize when somebody needs some help and, you know, be supportive when they need to be supportive. But I like to think that we're pretty good, and I mean, I think we just care a lot about one another as well. So, you know, that it's good that when you get older, you sort of realize how much you love one another, whereas when you're in your 20s, you just like, sometimes you don't necessarily want to see the best for one another.
Yeah, I wonder what it would be like being in Radiohead, being a man as opposed to being in Radiohead as a boy. Because when that first single exploded for you guys, and then I don't think people were ready for the bends and then the change to OK Computer. I mean, it was a bit of a crazy moment for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was interesting because the initial Creep stuff and Pablo Honey was a bit mental, and it was a bit like every man for himself. And I think what was interesting about that was that because it was such a violent sort of upheaval and so sort of shocking to our systems, that the cracks appeared very quickly, and we realized that unless you supported one another, this thing wouldn't last very long. Mm-hmm. And OK Computer, I think I remember being quite supportive of Tom, but not also recognizing on a personal note that, you know, I needed some support as well. So you don't know quite how to look after yourself, and I don't think we knew how to look after ourselves, but we knew that this thing needed sort of a bit of help sometimes from one another.
Well, you know, and you were mentioning earlier about a greatest hits album that's not really the Radiohead thing, or to support that tour. The good thing is if you had to do a Radiohead tour on a greatest hits package, you'd have to spend half your interviews talking about what that guy was saying in the Just video. And are you sure you want to revisit that part of your career?
No, but the interesting thing is that now that we're off the EMI, they're planning to do a greatest hits for May to coincide with our tour. So, that's an interesting one. I mean, we won't be doing any promotion for that, obviously.
Right.
But yeah, exactly. That's right. Apparently, Mark Ronson's done this cover of Just.
Yes, I have. Yeah.
And apparently the video that accompanies it, he's kind of redone the video with him in playing every single part.
Nice. I'll wrap on this. We started talking about the release of In Rainbows and the way it happened digitally. When it was released as a traditional CD, and then in countries around the world, including Canada, it debuted at #1.
Yeah.
What did you guys think?
Yeah, baby.
You got all J's.
It's amazing. It's great. I mean, you know, I think it's funny because if we're honest about it, when we did the download and everything and doing ourselves, you know, one of the things that we acknowledged was that chart placings was not really something for us anymore. And it was not, you know, it was kind of like, okay, well, you know, you work, because the previous records in the UK, they've all gone to #1 since OK Computer, not necessarily America or Canada. So we were sort of looking at that and sort of waving goodbye to those chart placings, and then it's almost like we could have our cake and eat it. You know, we did this thing, and then suddenly went to #1 in Canada and the US, and it stayed in Canada for #1 for a while, and it stayed at France #1. It was #1 in the UK. So it was like, you know, you guys are some 5,000-6,000 miles away on the other side of the planet, and Vancouver really is the other side of the world for us, and people are digging it. So and putting it at #1, I mean, that's still good.
The decision to not release the sales figures of the digital download, how did you guys come to that?
Well, because we've only just got it. I mean, I was looking at it last night we've just got it as a PDF file. It's just been done. It's every single country.
Wow.
Even Antarctica and a breakdown of it. So I'm sure they will be released.
Do you plan on touring Antarctica? Is that if you sold a lot? I mean, why not?
No, we can't go down there. That's a place not for human beings.
Certainly only for scientists.
It's a place for wildlife and definitely not for oil exploration.
That's another conversation for sure. Thanks for your time today. I'd appreciate that.
It's a pleasure, George. Thank you for your time too.
Let's play a song for you from Feist. What's the Feist song that you love so much right now?
Oh gosh, well, you know, I'm really new because we did this TV show with her 3 days ago, and people have been talking about the records. Mm-hmm. And I'm hopeless on names, and I don't want to do 1, 2, 3, 4 because I mean that's obviously beautiful. I know that's been done as an iPod thing. Yeah. But I really like it's the 3rd track on the new record.
All right, well, let's play.
Can you get me that? What's that one called?
Absolutely, I can find it for you. We'll play it for you right now. Thanks a lot for your time, Ed.
Thanks a lot, George. Cheers, man.
Take care, man. Here's Feist for Ed O'Brien from Radiohead on the Strombo Show.